last panel in Riga, where we discussed a little bit an interesting part about Austrian regulation, which led to the fact that players who gambled years ago used the opportunity to ask their losses back, based, a little bit explained, based on what legal basis they asked for this money, and why in the end the operators, mainly based in Malta, did not have to pay so far.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the nice words of the introduction, and thank you for the organizers for this nice event with this audience. To your question, I think we need to step back a bit in history, a bit of historical wrap-up. As an Austrian lawyer, I can rather talk about Austria, but everything works together, and we will also highlight the Malta Bill 55. Back in history, before 2018, we had a case law in Austria where, in my opinion, correct case law, where it was highly criticized that the Austrian monopoly is not compatible with EU laws. Yeah? Taking into consideration case law of the ECJ in Luxembourg, and in my opinion correctly done, that the monopoly has many deficiencies and is in the end violating EU laws. That was before 2018. We had a shift of case law, which is now the established case law since 2018, where the Austrian court said, no, everything is correct, monopoly is fine, it's not against the EU laws.
Could you just very quickly summarize how are the products regulated in Austria?
Okay. And we have, on the products, we have a monopoly on online gambling, which is, as I said, in my opinion, still against EU laws. Monopoly by Win Today, and there is online betting, which is liberalized, and it's on the competence of the Austrian Länder. We have 9 provinces, and that is in open market. It's no limitation of licenses. That's the split up. In a way, schizophrenic.
Just for everybody to understand, it's just about casino and poker we are talking now in regard to these cases.
No, in Austria, the definition of gambling is very broad. We have poker, we have bingo. All casino games is considered gambling, and online gambling is just allowed by the national monopolist with the one and only national license, Win Today. And that was where it started. That was the jurisprudence and the case law since 2018. That's the only one, the one and only, who has the license. And those who have not a license are now, by court rulings and by the established case law, are obliged to pay back the losses. We have to play claims, similar like in Germany, but not that massive. In Austria, it's very massive. We talk about 3-digit million euro, which is at stake right now. And coming also to the Malta situation with the Malta Bill 55, Malta sees itself a bit in a schizophrenic situation that they need to enforce rulings from Austria, where I said these rulings do not take into consideration EU laws, or not jurisprudence from the court, or not sufficiently take them into consideration. My opinion is still that the Austrian monopoly is not compatible with EU laws, but Austrian courts say differently, and Malta is in the paradoxical situation that they need to enforce those rulings in Malta. Most operators are situated in Malta, have the seats, have the licenses in Malta, and if you put yourself into the shoes of a Maltese politician, in the previous session we talked about politicians, then it's obvious, and it's from their point of view legitimate, that they do something against such a situation and would stop such enforcements by a bill.
So what do you think will happen next? So Malta more or less blocked the need of Malta-based operators to pay back those settlements or whatever. What do you think will come next?
As you see, it's a complicated game. It's like a chess game where we've seen Austria with a certain case law, which is now the established case law, in my opinion, still wrong. It's not considering EU law. And Malta doing the next move in such a chess game. Malta establishing a Bill 55, which is obviously also triggering actions by the EU Commission. So the next move in this chess game is the move of the EU Commission, which is very obvious. The EU Commission is the one monitoring the whole European common market. If there is a national act like the Maltese Bill 55, the EU Commission needs to act. They need to say, look at it, monitor it, and obviously that has been done so far. There are actions, there are letters going back and forth, but there, as far as I know, there's no open infringement case right now, but it will take some years to monitor this, to control this, and to check it.
So let's wrap up quite a smart move of the Malta regulator. Andreas, we have got such cases also in Germany, but the courts, what I have in mind, decided very differently. One said, this is an issue, the other said, people are adults, they know what is allowed and what is not allowed, and the operators don't have to pay back. How is the discussion right now in Germany looking also at Malta and how Malta reacted?
Yeah, so I think that at the moment, with interesting times in Germany as usual for operators and for regulators, and as Arthur already mentioned, there are some similarities between Austria and Germany, but also a few differences. And quite similar is that the Bill 55 is also a big topic right now in Germany, and it also affects the verdicts in Germany right now. But there are some big differences, as you already mentioned. The first one is that when we have a look at the regulation in Germany, sports betting is not regulated as a game of skill, it's regulated as a game of chance. That's different between Austria and Germany. And when we have a look at the past, under the regime of the last interstate treaty, the Interstate Treaty 2012, it was never intended to give away any licenses to private operators for online casinos, but it was intended to give away 20 licenses to operators for sports betting. And that's why the case law in Germany right now is completely split, because it was intended to give away sports betting licenses. So when we have a look at the online casinos, the courts clearly ruled in favor of the player, but sports betting, the courts are split, and that also applies to the 4 higher regional courts. They are involved so far, 2 ruled in favor of the player and 2 ruled in favor of the operator. And that leads me away to the second big difference in Germany, that we don't have yet a decision from the highest federal court in Germany. We will expect such a decision in the near future, and I'm pretty confident that we can talk about this decision on the next panel here.
Cool. Bernd, staying with Germany, we are now 9 months in having an independent authority in Germany. Permanent licenses have been granted for sports betting and also for slots and poker, but not everywhere for table games. I think for table games still not at all. How would you assess the situation in Germany 9 months into a kind of definite regulation for the moment?
It's we have to split it between sports betting and slots, because as you mentioned, the online casino part has been separated between slots, which is applicable for private operators, and the table games, blackjack, roulette, baccarat, and so on, and live casino would be only possible to operate by land-based governmental casinos or their licensees, and none of them yet applied for license. Even it's there is a political decision in each state of the 16 states in Germany needed to allow those lotteries this application. So, and that's also critical for the customers because, as we all know, blackjack and roulette was, with live casino, approximately 40–45% of the total online casino share. And customers who want to play those games, they have no other chance than going grey or black at the moment, yeah? Because it's not offered. So, and some others who still offered it, somehow they have been fined heavily and punished. And there was one big casino operator who had those table games in the back offered for their VIP players. In the front view, just complying for slots, and he applied for a license and he was refused now just a week ago. And we never know if he will be able to get a license. And the fines for that are not high, they're just 50,000 euros. But okay, you think it's not so bad, but the next level would be that it's a criminal offense, and then the managing directors could be put into jail. And especially for those who have somehow German-based operations or teams, it's a bit critical. So we will see still a big portion operating really black from abroad. And the government, in my opinion, they are not able to fight against this, and they fight more against licensed operators and punish them instead of fighting against those black ones.
But doesn't that have to do simply with the fact that they have some means, legal means, against licensed operators, but against unlicensed, they simply don't have the legal means?
Because from the licensed one, they have all the contacts and they know where they are, who they are. So
that's what I somehow meant. Because if you are sitting in Curacao, you can theoretically fine an operator, but how will you enforce it? No? That is the discussion which was, by the way, also made in the previous panel. Why should someone apply and so on?
What they're not trying to do is also they go against the affiliates, what I heard, so that they punished already some. And there, as in the last few years, most little sites have been bought by those big chains, Katina, Media, and some others. So they know exactly who they are, so then they can go against them, and they try to do it with finance blocking, but they are not really doing well, the finance blocking.
Okay, so can I wrap it up this way? It's simply not fully regulated, and that is a major topic in Germany.
Yes.
Henrik, you're active in the Nordic countries, Sweden, Denmark, Finland, and a little bit Norway. Now, when it comes to Sweden, which is a quite interesting market because they have so far still a low tax and a lot of licensees, and now they have even more licensees because they now grant licenses for B2B providers. Is that a smart move? And many countries discuss directly licensing B2B providers. Many operators request it in many countries. We've seen it already in Romania, in UK, and some other countries. Denmark, I think, is also considering it. What's your stance on this licensing of B2B providers?
Well, in the end, it always comes down to what is it really the regulator and the legislator want to achieve. Sweden has seen decreasing channelization ever since they launched their market. They started at around 90%. I believe they're down to 70% at this point. Well, I don't think there's any reason to to victimize the operators. Most of them in the market are doing okay, making money, but as long as everything is placed on the operator, you put a lot of admin cost. A lot of game suppliers are, at least that's what we experience on our side of the table, are struggling getting the game providers to hand over certification documents for all of the games in time. Then the operator gets fined for not complying with the requirements. So I see it as a show of good faith from the regulator in Sweden that they want to make it easier to be an operator by saying, okay, we take care of this. The game suppliers will have their own license, they will be responsible for the certification of their own games, and they will communicate directly with us. Typically, some game suppliers do not even want to hand over proprietary information about their games to the operators. So, and the regulator gets this extra control with the game suppliers in terms of, I don't know how efficient it is. I'm hesitant to say that it's probably not very efficient, but if you are a game supplier and you are required to have a license, and you can be penalized in a regulated market by offering your games to unlicensed operators operating in the same market, then there's a higher leverage for the regulator in this sense, and those are also the considerations in Denmark. And had it not been for the general election in Denmark last year, we would have had B2B licenses as well. Although the Danes are contemplating to include affiliates under that license.
And would that be a solution to have both variants, to have licenses or certification, also depending on the size of a B2B provider, because probably it doesn't make sense for every B2B provider seeking a license in all countries?
Possibly not, but that I'm sure will be regulated in the revenue share agreements that the game suppliers will have with the operators. This is a matter of allocation of cost ultimately. But the B2B licensing process in Sweden was nowhere near as complex as for an operator.
Okay.
But it's a matter of making sure that you lift off this burden of the operators to have to get the suppliers to be compliant in a position where the operator ultimately has very little, if any, leverage to pressure the game suppliers to get this documentation.
So, to sum it up, it does make sense because it alleviates operators from the duty to also take care of every single certification and of every single product they offer.
I think it does make sense. It's a matter of placing the liability and responsibility there where someone can actually do something about it.
So do you think Denmark will follow this path? And what do you think about Finland? Will they do something similar, or where would they look at most?
Well, Denmark will introduce B2B licenses, I'm convinced. We're expecting draft legislation any week now. That's probably not going to happen until at the earliest sometime next week, because the parliamentary year starts on Tuesday in Denmark. Finland, I think opening a market is dangerous for initial generalization if you introduce a B2B license straight away, because nobody knows what the regulated market is going to look like. And I think that it's a natural development both in Denmark and Sweden to add that extra licensing regime now for Denmark, 12 years in, for Sweden, 5-6 years in. If Finland were to do the same, I think there'd be a lot more reluctance to enter the Finnish market. So I think it would be a mistake for the Finns to go to open the market both with operator and supply licenses.
Does anyone know whether Romania, I think Romania did it right from the start to also ask for B2B licenses. Does anyone know?
Yes, that is correct.
That's correct. And do you have any experience how that worked out in Romania?
There are over 500 B2B licenses.
Okay.
Going up every week.
Okay. Okay. So it seemed to work out right from the beginning. Okay. Interesting. Thank you. Florian. Switzerland. Switzerland is different in nearly everything. It's in the middle of Europe, not part of the European Union, and hence they can allow themselves to regulate online gambling a little bit like the US does, as Southern America does, as for instance also Belgium does, which is interesting. Now we are more or less 5 years into the opening. International operators have to partner with Swiss casinos. And we had the burden of a kind of blackout for those operators who offered ahead of the regulation into the Swiss market. Big names among those operators. They are certainly eyeing now to finally being able to enter. Are there still casinos available to partner with?
So maybe at the first sight, the regulation in Switzerland might seem as fenced off towards foreign operators and foreign game providers. However, if you take a closer look on the Swiss regulation, it's not that fenced off in the end. In fact, every B2B and every B2C provider can already partner with a Swiss casino but cannot acquire any stake in that casino. The cooldown period, as I like to call it, is a period of 5 years when a provider has offered games of chance in Switzerland towards Swiss residents. They're often blocked and cannot offer then their online games. Maybe to give a bit of context to that question regarding the cooldown period, blackout period, etc. So the new Gaming Act of Switzerland came into force in 2019. And in there was a good reputation criteria that you have to fulfill in order to operate a B2C license. So for example, good reputation is proven by criminal record, debt register, regularly paying taxes, and so on. And as you've correctly mentioned, the having offered games of chance in Switzerland or not having offered games of chance in Switzerland for the last 5 years. If you have offered those games, you'll probably end up on this blacklist, which will further prolong this period you cannot offer directly to the clients in Switzerland. Now by January 2025, for the first providers, this will come to an end. Important side note, this only applies for B2C providers. B2B providers are exempted from that good reputation criterion. Interesting phase now in Switzerland, especially since we have currently the relicensing phase of the casinos going on, where it's not yet sure which casinos or which land-based operator can even operate from 2025 onwards for the next 20 years. So the decision on that will be expected by the end of October, latest by the end of November this year. So what we can observe at the moment, the knowledge in Switzerland has really grown from the operator side for the casinos, but also from the regulator side. The regulator is trying to understand the market and trying to act and trying to fight the unregulated market. Regarding first brands coming back to Switzerland, we had done some queries very on an early stage basis regarding that good reputation criterion. And, but as I mentioned, this is still in a very early phase, as it's not yet sure which casino has even a license from 2025 onwards. Maybe one last thing regarding certain difficulties that were experienced. If there is a multinational brand that has acquired many other brands during the last few years, it's possible that this brand they have acquired is on the blacklist. And this could lead to a loss of this good reputation criterion. However, we found some ways to get rid of this if you have acquired another brand, but I think this is something for off that panel later if you have any questions on it.
That is very interesting, the last point. I didn't know. So if you acquire whatever operator who was on the blacklist, you are into trouble.
Yeah, since then the operator is on the blacklist officially, all the UBOs, the beneficial owners, are on that list with the provider. This could lead in the loss of this good reputation criterion.
Wow, very interesting. Now you say the offline casinos, there will be a new tender. Do you think that means also that those who already partner with online operators brands, that they will more or less check whether there is anyone better meanwhile who could partner with them? How likely is that? And are there, just generally speaking, enough casinos anyway so that every big operator has a partner if they want to?
So basically in Switzerland, as is now the relicensing phase, every land-based casino can apply for an online gambling license. The government has to give that license if you fulfill the criteria. So in the end we are capped at 23 casinos, online casinos maximum. And for the newer ones, it's definitely hard to catch up there to the big 4, big 5 online providers as well. I can imagine that those really starting from scratch are looking for big partners, maybe now that the 5 years period is coming to an end, to really boost their name and push their business to success.
Very, very interesting to see how Switzerland solves things. Arthur, Austria has also a very special way to solve things by not solving them. Already, I think it was in winter 21, the finance ministry announced very big, we are going to review the gambling law and we will see how to regulate loot boxes. We will do something in regard to responsible gambling and we will set up an independent authority. So, did anything happen?
A lot of there happened. Yeah, I mean, I've been asked various questions on that, and we've been very active also with the Austrian Association of Betting and Gambling in Austria. Actually, the short answer is no, nothing happened. Long answer is actually there have been workshops. There have been meetings with the Ministry of Finance, within the coalition in Austria. We have a coalition of Conservative Party and Green Party, which is a bit burdensome in the end. We are going to have elections next year. So, to be honest, right now there's nothing to happen for the next month until the elections come. But you mentioned loot boxes, and also my colleague Urim is going to speak on that. He's the expert, and he's also within an esports association. But there have been actually workshops with the Green Party, with the Conservative Party, trying to solve this issue and trying to solve especially minor gambling. Is loot boxes, is every loot box gambling, yes or no? And to cover these things and to work on a probably potential amendment of the Austrian Gambling Act, which did not happen. And it's, I can foresee that within the next 12 months there will be nothing to be solved.
What I observed was that the monopoly became relatively active by increasing the minimum age from 16 to 18, and then also stressing it's only 50% in the black market of the online casinos. 50 is with us anyway. So I thought, because we have a Dutch CEO now with Casinos Austria, and he's quite.
No, we have several layers here. The one thing is loot boxes, and there has been a recent ruling. I'll come to that. But what you mentioned right now, I think that's in preparation for the upcoming tenders. Yeah? There's going to be a new tender. There's going to be a new licensing period coming for, well, at least it's in the law for 15 years. I think it's one of the longest licensing periods in Europe. And we today, Australian lotteries, Austrian casinos, are going, my prediction is that they're going to participate at least, they're going to be awarded probably with that license for the next licensing period. That's one thing. So we have an upcoming tender proceeding. My critiques on the tender proceeding is in Austria we are obliged obviously by EU rules, hopefully, and there have been so many regulations. There's one EU tender rules and establishing provisions how tender proceedings should run. And one thing is to have an independent gambling authority or independent tendering authority, which is not the case in Austria. The government knows that, and the government was working on that, but also here they could not find a solution, could not find a compromise between those governing parties. That's one layer. Upcoming tendering proceedings on the loot boxes. We have good and bad news. I mean, there is, depends how you see it, but there is a recent ruling from this summer on EA Sports and others that loot boxes, a certain form of loot boxes, are considered to be gambling. Yeah? If it's gambling, then we come again to this, what I mentioned before, to the player claims and the established case law that if it's gambling, you need the one and only license, which has only the monopolist, and those who are offering into Austria with a B2C offering on gambling and not having a national license are obliged to pay back the losses. And this is the start of a big wave of another player claims phase, which is now happening probably in the loot boxes.
And who defines which loot box is gambling and which is not?
The court.
The court.
There is a now second instance court. In the first instance, it was said it's not gambling, a certain form. In the second instance, now civil court from Vienna saying that it is fulfilling the 4 elements what you need, that it is falling within the definition of gambling.
It's cool that the courts are already specialists on loot boxes. How is that in Germany? And Andreas, perhaps in Germany, and if you know of any other country, how is loot boxes treated right now?
So that's the question, the biggest question right now, because there's no way to regulate loot boxes in Europe. There are no similarities. For example, in Austria it's not regulated. In Germany it's not regulated until today. We have some laws in Spain, which is discussed right now, but I don't know if it's coming or not. And so what I can say for Germany is that it was a big topic 5 years ago, and now it's become a big topic once again, actually because of the 2 verdicts from Austria, Hamburg and Vienna. And I'm not an Austrian qualified lawyer, so I don't want to give any judgment here. But as a German attorney, I can say, in my point of view, I think you cannot assess loot boxes in general as illegal gambling or gambling. And, but that's highly controversial right now in Germany, and at the first time there are some similarity aspects between the Austrian gaming law and the German gaming law, but there are some specific aspects in the German gambling law and the interstate treaty which need to be respected, which need to be taken into account when it comes to court decision. And just to mention 2, the first one is in Germany you need the risk of a total loss, and that means if you go to the casino and put 50 euros on red and the roulette and it turns out black or 0, there's a possibility that you lose everything. And in my point of view, that's simply not the case in loot boxes, because when you buy a loot box online, you always get a pre-known number of virtual assets to use them in the game. So that's why I personally think it cannot be qualified as gambling in Germany. A second point, which is also highly controversial right now, is the question, does a virtual asset has an economic value? And I personally think sometimes it's possible, but in the case of loot boxes, when we have a look at the terms of condition from the big publishers and console manufacturers, they say it's not allowed to sell these items, to buy these items. So I personally think, especially in the case of FIFA, Ultimate Football, you cannot say that these items have an economic value. But there are some lawyers in Germany who think you don't need the risk of a total loss, and the loot boxes, the virtual assets, have an economic value. So that's why it's possible that a court could come to a decision in Germany to say it's illegal gambling. And illegal because in Germany, it's not intended to give away any license to publishers or console manufacturers when they offer loot boxes. So that's why you can't get a license right now for loot boxes in Germany. So that's why it would be illegal gambling.
Just to add on this, I'm just summing up what's the Austrian jurisprudence in that. We have a second instance ruling, and just to be sure and to mention that, it's not yet the highest court, it's not the Supreme Court, and obviously this case will not go until to the Supreme Court for several reasons. But coming to that, what you said, I mean, we need 4 elements to be covered and to fall within the definition of gambling in Austria. You need to be, you have to have a randomizer, a pay-in money or money worth, a potential payout money or money worth, and to act as a company, yeah, and to do it obviously by company means, etc. So especially that what you mentioned, the pay-in is money or money worth. There's really no question on that, and the ruling says it. It's the pay-in or whatever you do via tokens, via any other means, money worth. But what you said is the payout issue is the court said, well, we know, when we see that some operators prohibit that it can be transferred to another player or that it can be sold or whatever, so limiting this economic value. Yeah? But the court also says, well, we see that there is a secondary market. There's even a black market. You can transfer it de facto. Although the operator does not want it, EA Sports, FIFA, this is so big that there is a secondary market, black market or grey market, and you can build up an account and pay a certain money and get the account. You can have other players building up a certain level and then transfer it. So there is a certain way, and the court was arguing in a very intelligent way, saying, although we know that the operator, it's not talking about guilt or not guilt, yeah, but the operator tried to limit these, that it's be circled, but de facto, the court said de facto, it is an economic value because there is a market.
Bernd, do you think this shall be decided, or any question about new products, whether it's now gambling or not gambling or whatever, but we get new products all the time, whether it's via loot boxes, virtual games, whatever. Shouldn't that be done at political level? I mean, those court decisions take a lot of time, and in the end you can argue in this way or in the other. But loot boxes are there, some are riskier, some are less risky. Like, is there any other product in that area, in other areas? Shouldn't the regulators simply take care, and also of other still not regulated products? Because you then have a like in Germany now, a market where the highly addictive slots are regulated, while the table games are somewhere in the black market. Isn't it simply the task of politics?
The politics are ruling it, but it should not be the task. So, and they should make their homework normally before getting out with a license. So, and all the regulations around the license. So, for example, today the safe server was going live in Germany. So, and now cheating is not possible anymore, as a lot of sports betting operators did. So they were covering from which sources the money came. So, especially for those who have land-based and online operations, and the money flow normally has to be splitted. And so as long as all those basic things are not yet fully managed or regulated, so I think our courts, they can't cover that. That's my opinion. So they don't have the knowledge, and it's influenced by the wrong people, and so it's, especially in Germany, so I would have never thought about that a couple of years ago, that Germany would be such a big mess.
Well, it's only 9 months. It can improve. Henrik, and another country is going to regulate, and one of the last ones, Finland. Interestingly enough, Finland wouldn't have had to regulate because the EU more or less accepted the way how they had their framework for gambling. What was the final drop that made them take the step, and what do you think, how will this, I know it's just guessing, but from what you hear and see, how do you think will this country be regulated?
Well, again, when we start regulating a market, you need to figure out why do I want to regulate. And I think it goes for, maybe with the exception of Norway, that still don't understand what online gambling is. The ultimate goal is to protect the consumers in the Nordic markets. And the final drop in Finland was when the state-owned operator said, we need a level playing field. We can't compete with this regulation. And the trend has been the same in Finland as it has been in any other Nordic country. The gross gambling revenue is going up, and the market share of the monopoly, if you can call it that, is going down. And at some point, it happened in Denmark first, and it happened in Sweden. Now it's happening in Finland. The market share of the monopoly is so low that it makes no sense not to regulate. So that was ultimately the final drop, I believe, in Finland. And most other legislation up north has been somewhat harmonized between the countries. So I think Finland will look very closely at Sweden and hopefully get some inspiration from Denmark as well, because Sweden is not necessarily the right way to go.
Well, then you would prefer Denmark to the Swedish model in Finland, and do you think Sweden also eyed Denmark when they now consider increasing the tax from 18 to 22, because also Denmark increased the tax? How do they interact overall? Do they meet regularly? How would you describe the workflow of the Nordics?
Well, the Nordics are like siblings. They're always fighting internally, and everyone thinks they're better than the other one. They do form unity when there's an outside threat, I think. The Swedes do not look to anybody. It's ultimately the same structure as the Danish regulation and what they applied. But they always think they can do better, just like any other country out there. The main difference between Denmark and Sweden lies probably with the regulator, where the Danish regulator has always been very pragmatic, understanding that it needs to be an attractive market both for the consumers and for the operators, and it needs to be enforceable for the regulator for it to work. Where the Swedes have shown a very hostile approach to operators. They see them as the enemy, and they see the players as victims, and I'm pretty sure most players do not see themselves as victims. They just want to be entertained. So ultimately that's the main difference. That's why I'm saying I hope the Finns look more to Denmark than Sweden, and it's not necessarily for the structure of the regulation, but to the way it's been implemented and enforced.
And handled. And what would you guess is the timeline for first licenses to be issued?
Well, my experience, there's a lot of similarities between the way Swedes do things and the way the Finns do things, and that's very different from the way Danes do things. The Danish mentality is a trial and error. My favorite example is the bridge between Copenhagen and Malmö, where the Swedes, they have endless meetings and they plan everything in detail. The Danes just started to build, and they started, I believe, 9 months before the Swedes. The Swedes were done 6 months before the Danes with their part, because it was all well coordinated. And the Finns keep claiming, and it's not been there's not been really any variations for the past year. January 26th is when they plan to open their market. So at
Do you
this
think
point,
it's realistic?
I believe so. Yeah, we saw a fairly efficient and short process in Sweden, and my experience is that the Finns will be able to do the same.
So Austria shouldn't Austria follow this example? I mean, it's now finally more or less the last one to regulate.
No. To be honest, in Austria it's a stuck situation. As I said, I mean, we have a government who is not willing, who is not able to do anything. Government, the coalition is over, almost over. There's elections coming. One thing what reminded me is, in the Nordics, you also talk about taxes of licensed, and one similarity between Austria and Germany is we have still some fragmented parts, but on the tax, the Minister of Finance is always very sure, hey, we tax both the licensed and the unlicensed. Hey, come on, it's a very cool situation for them.
That's really a similarity between Germany and Austria, and I don't remember any other country who did that.
But in a way, you are accepting, as a politician, as a government, as a country, that you have a fragmentation and that you have some loopholes. And one last loophole is what I just wanted to mention. We also have a recent ruling on that, the sports betting issue. In Austria, it's a very schizophrenic situation that it's not covered by the gambling regulation. We have the Gambling Act, which is a massive act, and then we have little 9 betting acts, which are falling outside. It's a historical thing, it's the competence of the lender, nobody wanted to give this competence to the federal state, a very human thing, if you got something, you never get rid of it. And in a way, they try to stick with it, but there's no real regulator being able to regulate online sports betting. So we have 9 provinces who can do online sports betting regulation, but they're not able to do it. And if they do it, you need to have some physical ties to a certain province. You need to have a betting shop or a server, whatever. In a way, all mere operators, mere online sports betting operators are falling outside of the scope of application of the Betting Act. And that's confirmed just recently by the Austrian High Court, the Supreme Court, in a steering case, saying that if you're not really operating within stereo with physical ties tied to this province, you're falling out of the scope of application. And then you're falling out of, you're not even licensable, you cannot get a license for online sports betting, and you're not fined, you're not sanctioned if you operate and you offer your services to B2B customers within Austria. Services for online sports betting.
So Austria will not follow Finland.
But you will be taxed at 2% of tax if you're licensed or unlicensed. Like in Germany, it's 5%.
Florian, now what interests me also in regard to Switzerland, because I didn't follow it that closely. We've seen across Europe very tightening advertising rules. Now, since we have in Switzerland this combination of off and online, is advertising an issue in Switzerland?
Currently, advertising is not really an issue in Switzerland, as the regulator already sees the potential of advertising as a casino as a way to get the Swiss resident people playing in a Swiss regulated casino itself, rather than going abroad and playing there without any social responsible restrictions, etc., etc. From a pure practical view, we don't see this many ads for casinos, for sports betting, even in live TV compared to the UK, for example, where really everything was advertising. Okay.
So what I see again is, from everything you told me also today, it's not one special rule, one particular lack of rule, it's quite very much a combination and a mix of the measures that make a market work or not work. Last round, would you all agree that Denmark is the model still to follow, or is the tax combined with the regulation in Denmark too high already? Is Sweden, meanwhile, the better model? What would you advocate for if you had to in a new market like Finland? Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, I'm possibly a bit biased since I mainly work with the Danish model, but I think we still have a very good environment, and we still have an authority that understands that the operators are not villains, they're businesses, and they need to be able to run a business. And the best protection from the black market is that we have a functional white market that is allowed to advertise, that is not overburdened with ridiculous fees for minor infractions as we see it in Sweden. The taxes, there's probably a lot of opinions on taxes. When they increased, when we had the, what was it, 30% increase in taxes from 20 to 28%, we saw a lot of operators deciding not to renew their license, and we had, with Nordic gambling, at least a handful of pending applications on the way that were abandoned immediately, because with the higher taxes you get higher entry costs for operators, and I think that was a mistake in terms of having an attractive white market, because only the big ones can really afford with high competition, very high return to player, only the big operators can afford to be there, and I'm afraid, and that's also sort of what we heard from our clients, they're excluding innovative new operators from the market by high taxes.
That is a very relevant point, and we heard it also already in the previous panel. Also, why would new innovative companies seek a license? So what's your view, just very quickly, still, do you assess it the same way, or do you say, no, for instance, Germany's fine if they just opened up still the table games?
I absolutely agree with you, so that a clear license with affordable taxation and a very attractive product range would be the best way to have a wide market, because if taxation is too high, entry levels for regulations are too high, or products are not included, this drives operators and customers into other opportunities, but it's politically driven why some of those regulations are there, so it's to protect some others, and it's not the view from a countrywide and a customer point of view, where we all have to understand it's entertainment as everything else. As some on the other panel they talked about sugar and tobacco and alcohol. So if the customer and the people in the country want to have this product, so make sure that they can get it in a safe way, and operators can live in the country, provide the service from the country, so that helps everyone. But I think it's still a long way in some countries to understand that and regulate it correctly.
And Austria, I wish we had a regulator like the one in Denmark. We don't have an independent regulator, and we would need a regulator who has in its eyes the operators, the customers, the channelization, the massive products which can happen, and also the innovative products. And what we see is just we have a fragmentation of the market, and it will not change for the next months.
Andreas?
And just to add some information for the German market, or to give an interim assessment, because we are 2 years in now under the new interstate treaty, And I think an interim assessment is mixed. We have the new supervision authority in Halle Saale, and I think when we put the new interstate treaty in the historical context in Germany, it's a huge step forward and into the right direction. Because when we have a look at the current whitelist, for example, there are 40 licenses have been granted for online virtual slot machines, over 30 licenses for operators for sports betting, I think 5 licenses for online casinos. So it's the first time ever that it's possible, it's even possible for a private operator to get a license in Germany. But as Bernd already mentioned correctly, we still have a huge way to go, and when we have a look at the daily business, what the GGL is doing, the supervision authority, so-called GGL, I think they have to rearrange their focus from the legal market to the illegal market. And what they're doing right now is they see that all their instruments, enforcement instruments, IP blocking, payment blocking, it doesn't really work out. So they focus right now, that's my personal point of view, they focus on the licensed operators, sending out hearing letters every week. And I think that's good. They have to protect the legal market, and that's what they have to do. And I think that will be better if they would change this in the future.
Florian, your last words?
Adding to that, definitely competition helps in the market. In Switzerland it's like that you now at least have to acquire some shares of a Swiss casino to get into the competition. With a revenue share model, it's only possible for game providers. But in the end, even the fear now that the big provider could come to Switzerland again after this 5 years period is over, really raises some casinos, let's say they're worried about it because of big names being again active in Switzerland. And they're really trying to move forward, get all the advantage they can possibly get to run away from them.
For me, what I see and what is so fascinating when I look at those countries, I don't feel that many of those countries really have the customer in mind. Because in one country they forbid or monopolize sports betting, in the other country they monopolize casino. And for me, only those countries who really open up to all products have the interest of the customer in mind. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening, and have a lovely lunch break. Thank you.
So I have to